Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by James Oliver, the founder of Atlas Protein Bars. James, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
When you set out to start Atlas, the idea of a protein bar is not exactly a new idea. Why did you feel that the world needed another protein bar?
I started it, I think, in the way that a lot of people start something, which is common phrase is that they're looking to scratch their own itch. And so for me, what that meant was I was looking for something, and it didn't necessarily have to be a bar, but what I was really looking for was a convenient, portable source of quality of nutrition that I could feel good about eating every single day. And so when it comes to quality nutrition, I know that's a vague term and it's not formally defined, but to me, what that means is the quality of the ingredients and then the quality of the actual nutrients, the macro nutrient profile that's within the food itself. Because you can have one without the other. Like, you can have quality, for instance, if you just had like organic honey, like that is a quality ingredient by modern standards, but it's also just pure sugar. And at the same time, you can also have, on the other end of the spectrum, you can have quality nutrition, like quality quote unquote nutrition, that is like high protein, low sugar, but it's made with all processed, artificial, engineered ingredients that might not be the best to consume on a regular basis. And so what I was really looking for was something that was at the intersection of those two, that had both the nutrition side, but also the ingredient side. And I honestly didn't really I didn't set out to like make something. It started because I was like, I just can't find this. And if I have this issue, and I know I was a big consumer of the kind of category, and the reason that people consume so many nutrition bars and nutrition bar is like the format that it is because it really is like the most efficient way to carry portable nutrition. You could make like a disc or whatever, but like a rectangle is kind of and part of that is also like, it's just a rectangle is easier to produce en masse than like a circle. But yeah, it's really the reason that there are so many bars because it's just a very convenient way to create nutrition. And it was really just shocking to me. It still is shocking to me how few options there are that check both the nutrition and the ingredient boxes. So I initially started, I've shared this story elsewhere, but I initially started it because I was going abroad to China and I was living there in a homestay for 5 months, 6 months. And I was going to be learning Mandarin or extending my studies of Mandarin. And I already had been pretty deep in the world of nutrition at this point in my life. I was in college and I was doing, at the time, I didn't even know they were called this, but I was doing like ultra distance stuff. So I was pretty deep into like, okay, I know that I need these nutrients. I know that I need to refuel like this. And I knew going over there that a lot of the tools that I have in the States were not going to be available to me in China. And I was going to be really eating like a very kind of carb heavy diet, like a lot of rice, a lot of buns, a lot of noodles. And I did, I had a lot of those things. And so I was like, well, I want to try to somewhat stay on track. And so I was like, well, I can just bring over a bunch of like nutrition bars with me because that was really the only thing that made sense. It was shelf stable. It was something that you could have every day. And there really just wasn't anything that I was like, yeah, I would feel comfortable eating this every single day, if not multiple times a day. And it's going to help me kind of augment what my nutrition needs are while I'm over there. So I handmade a couple hundred of them. I actually had my mom help me hand make them, put them into Tupperware containers with me, and then I brought them over and had them for months when I was over there. And I got back and I was like, yeah, I think that there actually could be a space for something like this in the category. Like, it's probably one of the most crowded categories in food, but I just had a hunch that if I had this issue, that there probably were other people that had this unmet issue as well. So that's really how it got going.
Explaining the story like that makes sense, because if you just think about someone who's doing ultra endurance events, like a bar that is almost entirely protein is not really the thing that you want for an ultra
Yeah.
endurance event. Like you want something that's going to be way more calorie dense than your bars are, and probably a ton of carbs and more fats. Like you want something that's maybe a 800 calorie bomb rather than like a pretty lean 200 calorie, essentially no carb bar. But you're trying to fill the protein gap where it was just unknown circumstances that you were getting into, and you knew that you would have no trouble getting carbs to fuel your running performance or just life in general. And protein may have been the place that you were lacking. And so making it come full circle like that really makes sense. Whereas a lot of the other protein bars, and we all know this, and myself and all my trainer friends all know this, is like, yeah, they're fine, but it's like a chocolate bar with a lot of protein. And so that's great, but we're all susceptible to marketing, and I'm sure you went through them. And when you look at all of them, you're like, okay, yes, there's 20 or 30 grams of protein in this bar, but also 37 grams of sugar. And it's like, well, what are we really doing here, right? And
Yeah.
that's where that's where it gets tricky. That's why it's always been interesting to me how me and my trainer friends are not the people that like rely on bars, but it's because once you look at the label, you realize what's in it. But it's the quote unquote average consumer, to no fault of anyone's own, who doesn't look at the label maybe as deeply, that just sees the marketing and says, oh, 27 grams of protein. My trainers told me 8,000 times that I need more protein. So let me grab this. Meanwhile, it's like a 700 calorie thing with a little bit of protein in it.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, you touched on two things. One, that I was doing ultra marathons, and a lot of the things that I've done are endurance events, but I actually don't consume Atlas, and that's not what it's for, because as you pointed out, you basically want the inverse of that. You want higher carbs and lower protein, because protein stresses your digestive system, and that's not what you want when you're in the middle of running 20, 30, 40 miles. So I use Atlas really for everything else but training. So it's like for recovery, for meal replacements, because yeah, you might be training, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours out of the day, but that means that the other, whatever, 13 hours that you're awake, you're not. So it's really intended for those other gaps, and not when you're in the middle of some kind of endurance event, because it's not optimal for giving you the glucose that you need to fuel that type of exertion. And yeah, that was one of the things that frustrated me and still frustrates me to this day, is when consumers, there's a difference between consumers who are like, yeah, I'm choosing to have whatever Reese's or candy, like I know this isn't the best thing for me, and I'm just gonna have it anyways because I want to have it, whatever. But then there are consumers who are like, okay, I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm trying to eat better, I want to make healthier choices for myself, and they're trying to make the right choices, and then they choose through no fault of their own, because they're misled, I think, by marketing, options that really aren't the best for them. And the example that I use that was a real example from my own experience was, I remember picking up, it was Gatorade's protein bar, and Gatorade is like probably one of it's like the legacy nutrition brand. It's been around for, I don't know, a couple of decades at this point, and they have endorsements with some of the top athletes in the world. So the average person is they're believing that whatever Gatorade is putting forth is something that is used by like some of the top athletes. So they're like, if it's good enough for whatever LeBron James, then it's good enough for me. But if you actually flip over like one of their protein bars, it does have, as you pointed out, as 20 grams of protein. So you're like, okay, cool. My trainer said I need to eat more protein. This has 20 grams. But then if you look at the sugar, I think the last time I checked, and I think this is still the case, it's 29 grams of sugar. And that's literally more than a Snickers bar. So it literally has more sugar than a candy bar, and it also has 50% more sugar than protein. And if you look at like the total grams, I'm not sure what the exact total grams are of that product, but it's probably close to like half of the product. If the product is 70 grams and 29 of them are sugar, then basically like half of what you're paying for is just pure sugar. And so it upsets me, because when people are trying to make the right decisions and they're just kind of misled due to marketing, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it's hard enough as it is as a consumer to be healthy in the modern world. And brands should make it easier for consumers, not harder, to do that.
The athlete thing is always such an interesting discussion topic to me, because it's so far from what the actual end consumer needs. And it's the same for training and especially for nutrition. Like there was a video just happened that you're talking about Gatorade, and there's a video of LeBron that was going around a couple weeks ago of like some very odd exercise that he was doing. And it's like, okay, if you do that, will you be LeBron James? Like, absolutely not. And you could argue that like that exercise is probably not even good for LeBron to be doing, but like he's also the best basketball player in the world. It's like, what are you gonna say, right? And his trainer is probably just trying to get him to do anything, and maybe that was just one silly. Like, there's way more unknowns than knowns about his actual like strength and conditioning routine. But the same could be said about their nutrition. If you are an elite world class athlete performing at the highest levels, you do need all of that extra sugar that's in a regular like Gatorade drink or in the Gatorade bar or in whatever many of these other products that have like a lot of excess stuff. But if you are not an elite athlete, which if you're listening to this, like I'm pretty sure that you are not a world class athlete, because this is, you don't need those things. You don't need that 27 grams of sugar or whatever 29 grams of sugar right after your workout. Like, you don't need so many electrolytes. You don't need all of these things. It's nice, and if it's good enough for LeBron, it's good enough for me, except you're not LeBron James. So it's like, it's one of those marketing
totally.
things that, like, as business people, we both understand like how getting LeBron as your ambassador would be phenomenal, because again, if it's good for LeBron, it's good for me, but kind of a disservice to the end user, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's very tempting. Like an example that I think of, and it's just very tempting to make like a faulty comparison like that. Like Floyd Mayweather. I remember reading when he was, I think it was back like years ago when he was about to fight Manny Pacquiao, and they were just doing like these kind of long articles on like what their training looked like as they trained for the fight. And I remember reading that Floyd Mayweather would like drink like Coke all the time, like after his training. And somebody might look at that and be like, well, if Floyd Mayweather can drink Coke and he's like one of the greatest athletes in the world, then like it can't be that bad. Then like I can do it. But you don't realize that he's burning probably like 15,000 calories a day doing whatever he's doing. That's the reason that he can drink it. Like having a bottle of Coke is like a rounding error in his nutrition. Whereas for everyone else who's just like living a modern sedentary life, you're not doing that. So you can't do that. But yeah, that like comparison being like, this person, I see this one thing that this person does. I don't see like the 99% of whatever else they do, but I just see that one thing. And then I'm like, that makes me feel like it's a safe thing to do.
Right. It's the natural human instinct to want to take the path of least resistance. Like, you want to be like Floyd Mayweather. Well, I'm not going to train for 6 hours a day. Like, that's too much, But I can drink a Coca-Cola after my 35-minute group class workout. Like, I can do that. And so there's so many stories of this. And even Usain Bolt at the whatever year it was with the Beijing Olympics, I believe, and he had nothing but chicken nuggets for the whole time that he was there. And it's like, well, does that mean that you're going to be as fast as Usain Bolt, or was there a very specific reason why he did that? And there's so many of these athlete stories, and we know that many of these athletes are actually world class, like, in spite of their nutrition and training and some of their other habits, not because of their habits. And Usain Bolt, if he had better food than the chicken nuggets, he probably would have performed maybe only 1% better, but probably better than just having chicken nuggets. And so there's more unknowns than knowns, and we can't just really copy that. But to your point, and kind of bringing things back to Atlas, is like, it does fill the actual gap that most people have, which is straight up just not getting enough protein. And I'm sure you've heard that a million times. Anyone who listens to this podcast has heard that a million times. All of my clients have heard that hundreds of times. It's the real thing. No one is getting too few carbs. That's not a real problem anywhere in the world, but almost everyone is eating too little protein.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what the recommendations are in Canada, but I know in the U.S. So the undergraduate school that I went to was Tufts University, and they have one of the better nutrition programs in the country. And I took a number of courses in there, and one thing that I didn't realize until I went through those courses is that the recommended daily values, like what the FDA in the US establishes, like the percentages, those are not based on what is optimal for health. Those were established to prevent nutrition deficiencies. So when it says 50 grams of protein, that is not like, hey, you should shoot for 50 grams of protein. That is so you do not develop any nutritional deficiency. And that is very, very different than what you should actually have if you want to kind of be functioning at like your optimal self. And not optimal self in a way that like you have to optimize, but it's just like people, I think, point to the 50 grams. And I've seen, it's crazy the number of like articles that I've seen where people are like, you don't need to consume that much protein. The recommended daily amount is 50 grams, without putting in the caveat that that amount is based on nutritional deficiency and has really little bearing on what you should actually consume. For like the research shows that it's closer, I'm sure you know, it's like closer to zero 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, which in most people's case is like 2 to 3x what that FDA recommendation is. And so I think that the guidelines, like there's just so much confusion because the guidelines are misinterpreted to be what you should like shoot for optimally, as opposed to just basically a bare minimum safety net.
It's a similar problem as not reading the labels fully or correctly, like in their full context, right? Again, you see the Gatorade protein bar has 20 grams of protein and you stop there. You see the daily FDA daily protein recommendations, and I don't know exactly what ours are in Canada, but they're probably exactly the same because we just would copy whatever the FDA says, most likely. Fortunately or unfortunately. And it's like, yeah, that's a recommendation, but that's like your bare minimum. That's not what you should be aiming for. And anyone who's coached anyone in any type of performance or any type of like, here's another way to think of it for people. And I don't think I need to really convince anyone that that's too low who's a regular listener of this podcast. But if you could get away with just eating 50 grams of protein, don't you think all the trainers would just be like, stop telling their clients to eat more protein? It's the hardest thing to do nutritionally. If we could just get people to eat 50 grams of protein and that would solve all the problems, we would just do that. And now the counter to that might be, well, you're all sponsored by protein companies and it's big protein. It's like, well, first of all, very few people are sponsored by any type of protein company. And second, big protein is way less than big pharma or big whatever. Like, fitness is such a small fish in the grand scheme of the world, and the protein bar space may be a crowded quote unquote space in food and all these things, but so few people are healthy and taking care of their health that like this is not as big of a financial driver as some of the other things that, you know, the powers that be, if you will,
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah. On that point, actually, another thing that I realized in my studies and research on the powers that be point is the initial. I don't know if they had something similar in Canada, but when I was growing up, we had the food pyramid, which has like the grains at the bottom, and I think it was 8 to 11 servings of grains. Then it kind of ladders up, and I think like oils and something are at the top. But the initial recommendation, based on the research when it went to Washington D.C. to get approved, I believe it was like 6 to 8 servings of grains. It might have even been lower than that. And then it came back after it went to Congress and to whatever committees, and specifically, it got influenced by lobbyists of large food companies, and it came back and it was increased from whatever it was. It might have even been as low as like 4 to 6 to 8 to 11 servings a day. So that 8 to 11 servings, which for decades was the government recommendation, that was significantly distorted by lobbyists in the food industry who wanted to have that increased, because if you double what everybody thinks they should be having for grains, then you can sell people a lot more cereal. You can sell them a lot more bread. And that's actually, I was like shocked when I read that. And I'm pretty sure the person who said that in an interview was the person who was commissioned by the FDA to come up with the food pyramid. And she was like, yeah, I sent this away. And then it came back. And I was like, that is not what I recommended. So yeah, it's a bit disheartening because it makes you question, like, well, what can I trust if the regulations, if what we turn to, if the government guidance is not actually aligned with what's healthy and what's best for me? Then do I just have to figure out all this stuff on my own? And I think we have started to see this in society where people are very skeptical of being told from just like on high what they should be doing. And that's why there's this explosion of people like yourself who are basically filling that gap and who people can turn to as trusted sources of information.
And thankfully, we have people like yourself who are actually going and making the things that people can use rather than just the recommendations, right? And you know, the unfortunate truth of what you're saying there is that in today's world, like, you do have to advocate for yourself. And I know that do your own research is like a very overused term, and most people are not academically trained to do actual research, and it's a slippery slope of what you believe. Like research is not watching TikToks or even listening to this podcast. Like don't just verify, whatever we
Yeah.
say is not, you don't just take this for what it is. Like, do some research. But you do have to actually like figure it out on your own, because there's too many voices, there's too many special interest groups and voices of authority and the government agency and lobby group and XYZ big company that will pull you in all types of different directions for all types of different reasons, some of which may or may not be actually in your best interest. So you do have to actually read labels and do your own research and all those kind of things. And on that note, how do you, if you have any kind of recommendations or kind of insight into this about reading labels, and when you read an ingredient list, what are we looking at? And maybe a question to kind of guide you in this is, I know that your bars, no seed oils, all no artificial stuff, all those good things. One of the ingredients though is, and this is for me like completely ignorant, I have no idea what this
Yeah.
is. What is vegetable glycerin? Like that sounds like a big scary thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not. Like, but what is it?
Yeah, great question. So, vegetable glycerin is a humectant. It's naturally occurring in many plants, and you actually have in the human body of glycerol, which is basically what vegetable glycerin is. So it's unfortunate because the word that they chose to label it sounds a lot scarier than it actually is. So it's this completely natural substance. If you look on a lot of, it's very common in like lotions, because it effectively is, it's what's called a humectant, which adds moisture. It helps retain moisture in the product. And so the reason we use it in the bars is because it's very hard to keep protein bars, protein products from getting dry and hard, because protein loves water. And vegetable glycerin, it's a completely natural ingredient that we can use to help soften the bar without it. Basically allows us to avoid using any kind of artificial preservatives or shelf life extenders in a completely natural way. So it's an ingredient that I think is great. It has very little glycemic impact, and it's about, I think it's 4 calories per gram, so it's similar to just a regular gram of carb. But yeah, I think it's a solid ingredient that is really necessary functionally. And I think the reason why you don't see more products like ours on the market is because when you have a much smaller toolkit to use, that toolkit being fewer ingredients and only kind of natural ingredients, it is much more challenging to create a product that tastes good, that is shelf stable, that that consumers are going to love over and over again. Like I don't think it's possible to create like a Dorito that is made with only natural ingredients. So you are kind of fighting an uphill battle, because you're playing on a tilted playing field, because the rest of the industry is able to use all of these things that you are not able to use. So it does present a challenge, especially because many of these other companies have R&D teams that are larger than our entire company.
Right. And it gives them two distinct advantages, I imagine. One is they're able to create different or more or potentially better flavors and texture profiles and stuff like that, and more variety. And two, they're almost certainly cheaper at scale than their more natural counterparts. So they're able to get a different tasting product or different textured product that is more fun, let's say, and cheaper. And so as a consumer, again, not reading the labels, not knowing what you're looking at, you're like, well, this one is, $2 less, so I'll just get that one instead. So vegetable glycerin is a naturally occurring thing, and the whole like chemical thing is sometimes a funny one, because you say like, or people can say, don't eat foods with chemicals. And, you can list out what's in a banana. And if you didn't know that it was a banana, it's like, it's all just chemical names. So vegetable glycerin, a naturally occurring thing. What are some of the ingredients that other companies or other products use that like fill the same function? If there's like an actual kind of comparison there that you can kind of, off the top of your head.
So
just as a way for people to look out for is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, sure. So the texture of it, it's almost like a kind of a syrupy, like almost like lotiony type texture. So the other ingredients that people would use that serves a similar purpose, that's going to kind of increase softness, extend shelf life, that would be more of like a corn syrup, a high fructose corn syrup. Some sugar alcohols that people use, like maltitol, that can do the same thing. So any of those ingredients that have usually they have syrup after them, or they sound like sorbitol, maltitol, those are going to have a similar function to glycerin. But yeah, in terms of your broader question on how to read an ingredient label, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but the ingredient labels are listed. You have to list it from most prominent ingredient to least prominent. So the first ingredient is always going to be the ingredient that is the most common. However, there are some, what I would say, like tricks that some companies use in order to um, it's not misleading, but it is just a bit sneaky. So, for instance, if I were a company and I wanted to, and I have a bunch of sugar in my product, but I don't necessarily want the first ingredient to consumers to say sugar, what I would do is I would split that sugar into, say, like rice syrup, honey, maybe corn syrup. And so then it's three different ingredients.
Mm.
So you can say, like, say you're making some kind of like peanut snack bar that is just like covered in this like sugar syrup. You can put peanuts as the first ingredient, and then you can put those three things as the next three ingredients. And so it looks like peanuts is the first ingredient, which is true. But really, if you were to do the by weight, like the majority of that product is just this like sugar syrup mix. But because you broke it into three separate ingredients, it looks like it's not. So there are some things that people can do that is pretty sneaky, that kind of obfuscates the truth for consumers. But in general, ingredient lists do go from most common to least common ingredients.
And
I think another thing that people should look out for is not look out for, but there is rounding allowed with the FDA. So some things that even some things that say like 0 calories or 0 grams of sugar, you can have up to 0.49 grams of sugar in something. So it can say zero and actually not be totally absent of that thing. And it's not like a huge deal because it is small amounts, but if the serving size is small and you say have like, I don't know, like 10 servings of something, you could be consuming more than you think you are, especially if you're doing something more regimented. I don't know, like a keto diet or something like that, and you are trying to stick to very like strict nutritional parameters, or you have some kind of health condition that you need to be aware of. There is rounding that's allowed that, again, I don't think that everybody is aware of.
yeah, you read my mind on the rounding. It was exactly what I was about to ask you. Is it only for sugar, and is it only for zero, or is it like how does it work for other, like if you have 5 grams of something, is it, you know, what's the rounding for the rest of the numbers, or is it only effective at 0?
No, it's across the board, and it is. They have like the public guidelines of what brands are supposed to follow, and it's specific by nutrient. So it's not like a broad. If I believe for zero, it is. If anything is under 0.5 grams, then you can round down to zero across the board. I do believe that's true, but for certain other ingredients, that is very specific to that ingredient. But for like calories, for instance, I'm pretty sure you round to the nearest 10 calories. So if it's 206 calories, you round to 210. If it's 204, you round down to 200. But for other things, like I think, for instance, like saturated fat, I think you still might have to list 0.5 grams. I don't think you can round down to zero with that one, but there is a good amount of rounding involved. Yeah.
Yeah, anyone who's read enough labels will know this, just because if you go and add up the calories based on the macronutrients and it says, 100 calories for whatever this thing is, and you add them up and you're like, but it's like 125. How do we get here? Like that's kind of how it happened. So correct me if I'm wrong here. My guess is that the reason that exists is just because of it's just probably easier to streamline things, and like calculating exact calories and macronutrients is like probably pretty hard in things like to be exact, and then across all of your products every single time. Like I'm sure you guys have lots of quality control, I imagine, but like every single bar across every single SKU across every single like every single time you make them is going to be like there's some margin of difference that's there, and it's obviously an acceptable margin of difference. It's not like a difference of 50%, it's 0.3% or whatever it is, but it's not exactly the same. So it's a way to save time and probably save some lawsuits from that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. You have to deal with the realities of manufacturing as well. You can't get down to the like tenth of a calorie with every single product you produce. These products are produced in the thousands, tens of thousands, millions, and although manufacturing practices are very good and it's very impressive how consistent you can get a product, there still is going to be some variability from product to product. So that's part of it. And then I think the other part of it is that you just need to have some like pragmatism when you're creating a label. Like you can't have a label. It would just be uh, more harmful, I think, than beneficial if you were to list out as a brand like 0.4562 grams of. It would just look like a spreadsheet. Like every
Right.
nutrition label will look like a spreadsheet. So at a certain point, you have to accept that, like, okay, this level of precision and accuracy is acceptable for general health purposes. And I guess for most things, they decided that that was really like the kind of the half gram mark, like or for like carbs, for instance, like it's the 1 gram mark. So you round up to 19 or down to 18. So I think that's generally seems to make sense to me, because you don't want it to be so complex that it just somebody's eyes glaze over and it's just not even helpful for somebody.
Yeah. The clarity here is that yes, companies can play some funny games and they can, there's rounding and these things, but you can't round that much. I'm sure you'll for sure have some insight on this, but like, I'm sure that there are some companies who can get away with some pretty egregious stuff and maybe have done that in the past. But if you're just generally following the rules, and like 99% of companies, it would be pretty tough to do that. Like, what are the checks and balances in place to make sure that what you say is on the label is actually what's in the product?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are nutritional softwares that are pretty standard in the industry that have you could load in, like if you were to make, I don't know, like a protein cookie at home, you could just load in all of the ingredients and the different ratios and it would generate the nutrition label, and it would do so with a very high degree of accuracy because the database is very robust at this point. It has hundreds of thousands of different ingredients in there. You also can take the next step, which would be you actually send your product to a lab to get kind of a nutritional decomposition profile. So that lab, they'll take it and they will give you, based on the actual product, what the actual calories nutrient profile is based on that exact product. So that way you can check, you can be like, okay, this is what my software says the nutrition should be. I sent it to the lab. This is what the lab says it actually is. How close am I? And we've done that in our experience. It's very, very close. And then in terms of what checks there are, surprisingly, I think it's similar to like the IRS in the States, where they don't have the resources to audit 99% of consumers. Like they're only checking the taxes of, I think it's less than one, like a fraction of percent of people. And it's the same thing with the FDA. The FDA does not have the resources to audit the 100,000 plus products that are in the market, especially because products are constantly coming on and going off. So it's really up to brands to police themselves. And this is actually, I I hesitate to say this, but this is actually where kind of the legal system of the U.S. is actually helpful, because consumers themselves are watchdogs for brands, and if brands do something that's out of line, then consumers have the ability, they have a mechanism for having those brands get back in line, which is a lawsuit.
How difficult was it for you to navigate all this when you were getting started? This sounds like, you know, you want to set out to make a protein product that's like going to be helpful for you and, all good. And then you're like, oh, but manufacturing and these checks and balances and all this stuff, this just sounds like, it's one of those things you probably like, I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to give this to the world. I didn't want to do all this other stuff. How did you actually navigate all this?
Honestly, I started by reading a lot of books. That was my first step. When I figured I was going to do this, I was like, all right, let me see what books I can buy. That there was actually a book at the time that was like how to like sell your food product or something like that. And so I think I bought probably like 10 to 15 different books, and I just started reading them just to understand what I was getting into, and also just so I could have a baseline understanding of like what the language is. because in order to like understand, like, as you know, in your field, you can't have a conversation about something if you don't even know what like the vocabulary
Mhm.
is. So that's one of like the first steps that I did is like, okay, what do I need to know that I don't know? And also on that line, I was very, very cognizant, very aware of the fact that there were a huge amount of things that I didn't know. And I was aware that there were a huge amount of things that I didn't know. So I was just trying to absorb as much information as possible so I could kind of shorten my learning curve as much as possible. So I really just read, I talked to people. It does help to start with in my experience, a manufacturer, because a lot of the times a manufacturer will have a lot of these capabilities in house, or at least they can guide you. If they don't have them in house, they can guide you to partners that do have them, so you don't have to do it all yourself. And there are some manufacturers that you can go to them with just your concept and say, hey, like I have this idea, I have like the outline of a recipe, but I don't think it's commercial ready yet. Can you help me make it commercial ready? And they'll work with you to make it commercial ready. And they'll go from kind of ideation all the way up to producing your product at scale. And yeah, there's a whole industry that exists to support this, but the challenging part is finding the right partner for whatever you're trying to do, because there's not really like a directory you can go to. There are some, but it's hard to get in contact with the right person. Where if you're looking to, I don't know, make a specific type of collagen protein powder or some specific type of food, they're the right partner to help you bring that to life.
Is this why a lot of the supplement industry, which is adjacent to kind of what you're in, they often just like get caught using the same manufacturers, and like one batch is spoiled of something, and it's like, oh, they're all the same, and it's because they all
Yeah.
use the same faulty or there was a faulty SKU or line, or for a few months or something going on in the factory that something was wrong. And is it again, just logistically, when you're starting your company, be it whatever it was, and you for sure were in this boat, like you didn't have the money to just go buy a factory and manufacturing facility and hire however many hundreds of employees needed to be done and do all the research and all the legal and all those things. Like no one would have that when you're starting out. So you've got to go to someone or some company who does this and, vet that company, be like, okay, are these guys, are they legit, or are they just trying to, take me for a sucker here? Must be a crazy, difficult process.
Yeah, it is. And I think naivete helped me when I was starting out, because you really should talk to multiple manufacturers and kind of go through an interview process with them. I just talked to one. I just started with them because I didn't even know to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely far less risky, I think, to start with a co-manufacturer as opposed to investing in a facility, unless you're certain that there is demand and that you are going to be producing this product for years to come. The economics usually do not support building your own facility. And some of the biggest brands today, like Nike and Apple, they don't own their own facilities. Another brand like that does would be like Tesla. So there's no one way to do it. You can create a massive consumer brand both by not owning your own supply chain and by owning the entire thing end to end. And it really, I think, depends on what your goals are and what you're looking to do. But yeah, to your supplement point, I think a general rule is that the easier a product is to make, the more of them you're going to see in the market. So protein powders are extremely easy to make, because you basically just take protein and you put it in a tub or you put it in a bag and you add some flavors onto it, and then you slap on a fun looking label and you have a protein brand. So those are extremely easy to make. They don't require a lot of formulation. It's a dehydrated powder, so you don't have to do a lot on the shelf life aspect of things. There are a lot fewer food products because they are much harder to make than protein powders, or like a pre-workout is like, yes, you have to do some work on the flavoring, but the base ingredients are going to be pretty similar. So I think that's why you see just this explosion, especially in supplements, of all of these different products that look very similar to one another, because they probably are very similar to one another.
Yeah, we've seen that far too many times. Like they're all similar. They're all basically the same, just with a different influencer's name or brand
Yeah.
slapped on it, and some strange flavors. There's very few that are just like it's hard to find just like chocolate protein powder
Yeah.
now. It's always like birthday cake or, you know, sunny beach flavor, whatever, some,
Yeah.
crazy stuff. But
Chocolate apocalypse.
yeah, there, exactly. Um, how do you guys handle quality control then? So you have your facility. Do you do any sort of like third party testing? Is that really a thing in the food space, just to like double check your own manufacturing, just in case they start slipping for whatever reason? Is that a thing that happens or not really?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, food. The other thing I'll say of food versus supplements is that the food regulations are certainly much stricter
Mm-hmm.
than supplements. Even the regulatory side of things, like I'm sure if you have looked at a supplement label, you've seen that statement that like this statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. It's a lot more of a gray area with supplements than it is with food. So across the board, food is much stricter when it comes to manufacturing processes. Like the facility that we produce in, they don't even allow gluten. Like you cannot bring any wheat or gluten ingredient even into the facility. So it's extremely strict. They have very, very strict protocols for all of the different ingredient receiving. You have to have extensive documentation for everything that enters the facility. So there's a lot of things on the front end that has to be done in order to even get the product, get the raw materials for the product into the facility. And then when you're in the production process itself, there's again a whole exhaustive list of checks that have to be done, checks and double checks to make sure that the correct ingredients are going in, that they're being mixed in the correct order, that there isn't a, like if you, I don't know, unscrew a pail of peanut butter, that there's no plastic from that pail that enters into the dough that you're mixing. And then during the production process for us, there's a number of different like checkpoints where products will be kicked out if they're defective. So if they don't meet the weight spec, it'll get kicked out. If there's an X-ray scanner that scans for metal, so if anything contains metal, it'll be kicked out. And then afterwards, we do send the product to labs to get tested for pathogens, minerals, and then we also will do additional testing on our own, like I mentioned, where we'll send it to a lab for a nutritional analysis, and we've done other lab tests as well. So across the board, it's like at every step of the supply chain, from inbound raw materials to the manufacturing to post manufacturing, there are a lot of checks and balances, and that is the reason why like you don't really realize as a consumer until you're in it. You just kind of go into the grocery store and there's food on the shelves and you're like, oh, this is great. I can buy my food all in this one room. But you don't realize how much work is actually done on the back end to keep this enormous machine that we call the food system running. And it is pretty incredible when you think about like how few, sure, there's, I don't know, the odd salmonella case or whatever that you'll hear about in the news. But the fact that you're hearing about it in the news tells you how rare it is. Because if it was happening more frequently than that, then it wouldn't be newsworthy. So it is like, given the amount of servings that are consumed every single day around the world, and specifically in this country, it's pretty astounding how little food safety issues there are, and that credit does go to the regulatory bodies who have put into place the processes that prevent those things from happening.
Yeah, it's a good way to think of it. And I think maybe even another analogy is like the like plane crash stuff, and knock on wood.
Yeah.
But every time you hear about a plane crash, it seems like a big deal. And every now and then there's like, 2 in 1 week, and it's like, oh my goodness, what's going on with planes? But when you think about it, there are thousands of flights going
Right.
every single day all around the world, and the percentage of a plane, something going wrong, is like unbelievably low. And same with food. Just think about the number of protein bars alone, then extrapolate that to all of the other food products that are going out and being shipped and consumed all over North America every day. It's like, okay, one salmonella case is not good, and we don't want that ever, but like one in however many millions or trillions of whatever it is like, hey, we're doing pretty good. It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I think counterintuitively, you should be worried when it stops becoming news, because when it stops becoming news, that means it's getting normalized, and then it's just a regular occurrence, and that's not good.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking about, and I'm not sure if you're going to have the answer to this, and if you don't, it's cool. Ozempic, the GLP-1s are very, like, way more prevalent in the world now, and many people are using them and all that stuff, and not to talk about that. But one of the things that I've heard is that quote unquote food scientists are now working on flavors and ingredients and things to kind of override the lack of appetite that is being caused by some of these GLP-1 drugs. Do you have any insight on that? Do you know anything about that? Do you have anything to say about that?
I have never heard about that before. So if I'm understanding, there's this like the pharmaceutical industry has created this drug that basically curbs appetite, and now the food industry is trying to respond by basically like combat that and do and override that.
That's my understanding of it as well. Like
Wow.
snack sales and stuff are down because people are like, hey,
Yeah.
I know I don't have a bag of chips every day. Maybe I have a half a bag or every couple of days or whatever it is. And they're like, well, hey, we gotta we gotta override the drug that is causing people to eat or stopping people from eating our food. And so it sounds like a very interesting thing, a pretty interesting battle, things that are at odds. I don't know how one would go about that. I mean, food science has certainly come a long way in the past. Even it seems like the last like 10 to 15 years, there are way more kind of health products and various types of ingredients than there were previous to that. And certainly way more than there was, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be some next evolution of that, but what that looks like, who knows?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with GLP-1s. Obviously, they've had this explosive exponential growth in the United States and are being adopted at crazy rates. What I'm curious to see is so they're obviously very effective at weight loss, but what I don't think that they're very effective at is actually treating the underlying issues like the underlying metabolic syndrome. So if you have insulin resistance or you have type 2 diabetes, yes, I think it will help you lose like 30, 40, 50 pounds, whatever it is, but you still will have that underlying issue that is going to require ongoing management beyond just the weight. So my kind of perception of it is that it's treating the symptoms, but it's not treating the root cause. So I don't necessarily share the belief that it's going to be like this end all solution that's going to cure kind of especially the US's issues with food and with obesity and all the other related issues. It does seem to be very effective at treating weight, but they've also been around for a fairly short amount of time. And I, and this might be the skeptic in me, but the saying that like there's no free lunches, and when it comes to like biology, like I find it hard to believe that there's not going to be some kind of long term effect that we might not just know about that will come from using this kind of medication, because the more it has a pretty significant effect on human biology, and it's hard for me to think that that significant effect doesn't have some kind of drawback or bill that needs to be paid down the line. But it would be great if it'd be great if it didn't. Regarding the question on the food scientists, honestly, I feel like they've already done a incredible job, too incredible, of making foods that have absolutely no satiety at all. Like I don't know how you could make a food that has like less satiety than a like family size bag of Lay's chips. Like you can eat that entire bag and be like hungrier than you were before. So I would be I would be curious to see what they could possibly create that has even less of an impact on your hunger than the foods that already exist. Because that's part of the reason why we have the issues that we do, is because, as I'm sure you're well aware, we have so many foods that provide energy, but with nothing else. They provide energy. They don't provide any kind of underlying nutrition, and they don't provide any kind of satiation. So you're just consuming these massive amounts of energy, but it's not actually giving your body what it needs.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I agree with you, and I've spoken to several doctors and whatever and stuff about this. But with the GLP-1s, is like, yes, they're potentially part of the solution overall, but there are so many things that go into this. And, it's kind of a cliche thing. Obesity is very multifaceted, but it is. There's so many aspects of it, and one of it is the foods that are available, the food system, whatever that really means, and so many things. So yes, is using the drugs part of the solution? Almost certainly, it seems like now. But is it the entirety of the solution? Like, probably not, just because there are too many factors at play here, where one little thing is not just going to solve all of the problems of the universe. And if it did, that would be great. But I wouldn't hold my breath on it.
Yeah, yeah. If it did, it would probably be the first. I'm trying to think if there's like another quote unquote like magic bullet in health that I can think of, and I don't know if I can think of any that's like truly everything it's made out to be that doesn't really have any drawbacks. Honestly, the only thing that I could potentially think of are like kind of natural 0 calorie sweeteners, and I don't really know why like the whole industry doesn't like. We use monk fruit for instance. It's completely natural. There's virtually 0 calories because you have to use so little of it because it's such a high intensity, and it provides sweetness without any of the downsides of sugar or high fructose corn syrup. That might be the only thing that I can think of, like sweeteners that don't really have any downside. But it's pretty rare in food, nutrition, and health to find a like a true magic bullet.
That point about monk food is actually really interesting. Why is it more? Is it significantly more expensive? Like, why don't more people use it? In
It's
your opinion?
yeah, it's one like if Coca-Cola tomorrow, if they wanted to be like, okay, we want to switch all of our formulas over to monk fruit, the supply chain does not exist for them to do that. The part of the issue, part of the reason why things are so entrenched is because we've basically had since World War II, this, at least in the States, this industrial supply chain, a lot of which has been built around subsidized crops. In our case, it's corn. And the reason why high fructose corn syrup is in everything is because we have massive amounts of corn and they needed to find something else to do with it. So they turned it into high fructose corn syrup. And now that sweetener is in everything. And because it's subsidized, it's also very, very cheap. So it's very, very cheap. It's everywhere. And it's very hard for a company at that scale to find something that can compete with it in terms of availability and in terms of price. So for instance, monk fruit on a per pound basis, granted, you don't need to use as much of it, but I think the last price we paid is probably close to, it's like over $200 a pound. Whereas high fructose corn syrup is, I think it's probably less than $1 a pound.
Wow.
So it's a very significant price difference. Granted, you need to use much less monk fruit than high fructose corn syrup in order to achieve sweetness, but it's still a very significant difference. And there's also different like functional differences. Like monk fruit's like a very fine powder; it's almost like a dust, whereas high fructose corn syrup is like a syrup. So it's very versatile. That's why it's also in so many things, is because you can use it in like baked goods, you can use it in frozen things, you can use it in drinks, you can use it in so many different things. And so it's very hard. There basically needs to be like a something that disrupts, like an ingredient that can disrupt high fructose corn syrup and that can provide a better way for these companies to achieve the same outcome with a lower price. Because at the end of the day, the majority of them are not going to do this out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to do it because it provides some kind of cost advantage. And given that their current ingredient is subsidized by the government, it would be very, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to have an ingredient that could be cost competitive with that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it sounds like it's essentially impossible. It's not like some undiscovered part of the world where we can, like, someone's gonna show up on some island
Yeah.
and be like, oh, they have this, like, new thing and it can replace corn syrup and there's an abundance of it that can supply the whole world in an
Yeah.
instant, and we can get factories and shipping, and that's just not, doesn't exist. Um,
I
and
will
and
say though that where it's very cool from your perspective and from like your listeners' perspective is that where the consumers have power is where you spend your dollars. So every time you choose to spend on a given product, companies exist off of cash flow, and companies can only exist if they have incoming cash flow. So companies really, they derive their power from the consumers that they serve. So if you choose to allocate your dollars to company B versus company A, then you are depriving company A of the money that they need to survive. So the reason that we see like Coca-Cola now their flagship product that they really seem to have replaced Coca-Cola with everywhere is Coke Zero. And that's not because all of a sudden they're like, oh, sugar's bad for people, let's stop pushing that product. It's because no, consumer demand has completely shifted towards zero sugar products, and their marketing and their strategy has followed what consumers have demanded. So that's where I find it very empowering and very cool, because the people really do have the power. And if the people, like, if everyone all of a sudden just decided overnight to not buy Coca-Cola, like Coca-Cola Classic tomorrow, then that business would evaporate. And so at the end of the day, like, the individual consumers do have power, and companies do have to listen to those consumers, because that's how they survive.
Yeah, 100% agreed, and great addition there. I mean, we have the same things in Canada to a lesser degree, but it's like, all these additives in food and all this stuff. And I had a discussion with someone maybe a week or two ago, and he's like, why is all this stuff in our food? And I said, well, it's just there because they just offer it to the market. Like, most companies are not in business to make people healthy. They're in business to make money. Like, that is the main function of the vast majority of businesses in the world. And so if they offer a product to the market, and the product and the market like loves that product and keeps buying it, well, why would they change? If you were the owner of that business, if you were a shareholder in that business, you wouldn't want them to change the product. Like, we're making money hand over fist here. But you as a consumer do have the power to, like, hey, all these things are in my, in my cereal, in my whatever. Well, then don't buy that product. And yes, maybe it's going to take a little bit more effort on your part, reading the labels and looking around and all those things. But if it's something that you really care about, then the effort or time that it's going to take, and or probably a little bit more money, is going to be worth it to you. But at the same time, if you like play this forward a little bit, maybe it's a little bit more money now because the ecosystem for those better products doesn't quite exist at the same scale. But give it another 10 years of everyone buying things that are sweetened with monk fruit instead of high fructose corn syrup. Now that may be like too extreme to really make a huge difference, but like, let's just say, then everything will get cheaper, and everything that's made with monk fruit, that price will come down from $200 a pound to $100 a pound, and it'll keep going down. So you can always vote with your dollar, and that's really the most important thing. And like, this is why I like conversations like this, because you get a little insight into how the industry works. And once you know how it works, it's like, oh, well, one, you remember that you just follow the money and everything kind of makes sense. And then two, you realize that because you need to follow the money to make everything make sense, you have the power to make differences by the way that you spend your money.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think following the money, like to your point on businesses are not in the best business in the world. Most of the best business, their number one priority is not the consumer's well-being. Their number one priority is to maximize how much money they can make. Like Coca-Cola as an example, it has been one of Warren Buffett, who's arguably the most successful investor of all time. It has been one of his core holdings for like 30, 40 years. And that's not because they are increasing the well-being of consumers around the world. It's because they print money. It's what I call like capital alchemy, where they basically buy pennies of like plastic and corn syrup, and they convert that into dollars of profit. It's like literally what they do. It's alchemy. They just convert one substance into money, and they do it so well that it has been the core holding of one of the most successful investors of all time. But it's not because they put consumer well-being first. It's because they put their own interests first, and they make a ton of money doing so.
To put a nice bow and positive spin on this, is like, you do have the power here. These companies, no company, and you'll attest to this better than I can, because you actually make a physical product. You don't make a product, or no one makes a product or service that is like, oh, people are just like, people must buy this. You make a product or service that you think and hope and pray that people will want. And if they want it, then you get money. And if they don't, then you go out of business. And so you're only making things that you think people want. And if they want it, you continue to do that. If they don't, then they don't. So it's like, it's not Coca-Cola's fault that they make those things. They just tried it and it worked because people spent a lot of money on it over and over and over again. And that's why it exists. So, if that is true, which it is, then the opposite is also true, where if you don't want those things to exist at such a large scale, then don't buy them and buy alternative, better products.
Right. And that's where, coming back to the consumer empowerment, that's where it is important to kind of arm yourself with the information that you need to make those informed decisions. Because if you don't have that information, then you can't possibly make those decisions. So it's important to listen to people like yourself, maybe not me because I don't even know what I'm talking about sometimes. But yeah, listen to people, come up with your own opinions based on everything that you hear, and make your own decisions based on all the information you have available. But you, at the end of the day, do have the power, and it's honestly just like this is a it's the same thing as democracy itself. Like democracy, the government derives the power from the people. It's the same thing with these companies. They do derive their power and their status from the consumers that they serve. And I think it's important for people to remember that.
Yes, a very good note, and thank you for all the insight for this whole conversation. Is there anything that you want to say about Atlas, the protein bars? Anything you guys got coming up? Anything new that's in the works or looking ahead that you want to kind of let people know about?
Yeah, we have a new flavor coming out in a couple of weeks, and then we probably are going to have a new product coming out soon after that, which I'm excited about. I think it'll be really the first of its kind. But yeah, I don't think we really talked about it much. But really, the product itself, it really is just protein powder, like high quality proteins mixed with nut butter and other natural ingredients. Like it is simple enough that you literally could make it in your kitchen. If I gave you all the ingredients, you could make this in your kitchen, because it's just these ingredients put together into an efficient way to consume them, which is a bar. So there's no like crazy treatment that happens. There's no heat. It's all just very simple. It's very simple. It's extremely simple, and the goal is to really make something that's as close to real food as possible while being convenient and making it easy for people to get the nutrition that they need.
Yeah, I can attest that. I've been eating them this week. You were kind enough to send a few over, and I'm not a huge, like, I don't regularly consume protein bars, and I'll have like my protein powder that I have, but I don't regularly consume them because every time that I have in the past, it always like it just feels so. This is not even an accurate term, but it just feels so artificial to me. And not
Yeah.
even that's necessarily good or bad. It's just like a flavor, a texture, a feeling that I don't like and that I
Yeah.
don't enjoy. And that hasn't been the case with eating your bars. It feels like, oh, feels like now that you say, the way that you say it is like, oh, it made in your kitchen. It has that taste and that feeling that like, oh, someone's mom made this and like brought them to soccer practice and like
Yeah.
gave energy bars to like, that's what it tastes and feels like. So I can certainly
Well,
attest to that.
that's not far off from the truth.
There you go. That's great. Where can people buy them? Where can people find more information? Are they where's the best place to go?
Yep. Atlas Bars on Amazon, atlasbars.com on our site. Socials are Atlas Bars. And yeah, hoping to get into, I don't think we're in many places in Canada. I don't know, because I've never tried to order from Canada. I'm sure there's some way you can get them. But yeah, those are all the spots to find us.
Yeah, speaking of money and scale,
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that it's not it's just like the Canadian market is just so small compared to the American.
Yeah.
Like when any Canadians who are listening to this, if you think about why don't we have good stuff here, it's like because our population is 10% of the
Yeah.
United States, and so now you factor in the tariffs and even before all this tariff stuff, but just you got to ship it way farther. You got to cross a border, so there is an import tariff anyways before these things existed, before the the new whatever chaos. Like if you're a company, why would you do that? It's going to be so
Yeah.
much more expensive. And I've tried to order a number of supplements and products and things from the US over the years. And it's like the shipping is like twice the cost of the thing. And then so it's like, I'm trying to buy a $50 bottle of something. It's going to cost me like $175. I'm like, it's not that worth it to me. So I don't blame you. But again, just, when you follow the money, these things kind of all make sense.
Right.
So
Yeah, I might be wrong on this, but I think that the California market is bigger than the Canadian market.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
The population is about the same, and it's
Yeah.
a smaller area, right? So it
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense. Cool, man. Do you have any personal stuff? Are you active on social that you want people to head to, or not really?
I have a social profile where I do like like I'll do challenges. As I mentioned, I did endurance stuff. Sometimes I'll do like challenges. Like one that I did was the longest street in New York City is Broadway, and it's actually 32 miles. And so I ran, just like I started at the top and I ran all the way to the bottom and recorded it. I also ran around the loop of Manhattan. Like if you circumnavigate all of Manhattan, I think that's about 30 miles too. Again, I never the word like ultra marathon is kind of weird to me because I just do these things and I'm just like, yeah, it's just like a thing to do, but I never like technically those are like ultra distances, but I've just never thought about it. It's just like a fun thing for me to do on a Saturday. So yeah, sometimes I'll share stuff like that.
That is the mark of a true savage who just wakes up on a Saturday morning. He's like, I'll just go for a 30-mile run. It's some people call this an ultra marathon thing, but to me, it's just a Saturday afternoon way to pass a few hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time and helping us to learn more. I'll put links to everything in the show notes, and people can go buy some bars and get yourself sorted. Any last words that you want to leave the people with here in closing?
I appreciate everything you do, and I appreciate all the information that you share with all your listeners. And just to the listeners, you do have the power. So continue to absorb information and make the best choices for yourself and your family based on that information. But appreciate the time. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Of course, wonderful message, James Oliver, Atlas Bars. Give them a follow, purchase the bars, get yourself some help, and share the episode with friends. Like, share, subscribe. All those good things help it all grow. That's that. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.